Hey there, Resilient Reiner friends. You are going to love today's episode. We have got Alexis Mann on as a guest. She is a student at the University of Michigan and a non-pro reiner. She was born without a right hand due to amniotic band syndrome. She rides amazing. And today we are talking all about the mental side of riding. We get into all of it. We get into how your stresses out of the barn affect your time in the saddle, how you can show up for your horse and acknowledge your responsibility to create a good ride. We get into how you can embrace whatever season of life you're in with your horse for greater enjoyment. Alexa shares how journaling has helped her learn the lessons she needed to learn about her riding to improve faster and shorten her learning curve. And I love Alexis's beautiful perspective on being curious and learning from other riders, from other barns and disciplines, because she has a beautiful perspective on always learning no matter who. She can learn from anyone and everyone. And that is definitely something that I hope all of you take out of this episode. And she shares something that she started doing that you can do too, that dramatically shifted the quality of her runs. And she shares the mindset shift that she had to not be crushed after a bad run. She is just so sweet. And I know you are going to get so much out of this episode. Dive on in. I'm so glad you're here.
Hey there, friends. Nicole here. And I want to start by saying a huge thank you to all of you readers and subscribers of the Resilient Reiner newsletter and podcast. I am truly honored and grateful for the thousands of you who make up this amazing community. For those of you who love Resilient Reiner and have been asking for more, and for those of you who have been wondering how you can support me to do more of this work, I've got good news for you. Introducing Resilient Reiner Premium. This will give you more of the newsletter and podcast you love. As a Resilient Reiner Premium newsletter subscriber, you'll get additional exclusive newsletter episodes and podcasts just for Resilient Reiner Premium. Don't worry, I'll still be putting out free weekly newsletters and podcasts filled with mental coaching goodness for riders. For those of you begging for more, now you've got it. Just click the link in the show notes to sign up. Easy peasy.
Welcome to the Resilient Reiner, the premier podcast focused on mental performance for equestrians and improved horse show performance. Whether you're a rookie reiner or a seasoned competitor, this show is for riders who want to take their skills to the next level and achieve their full potential in the show ring. I'm Nicole Burnett, and I'm a master mindset coach who's obsessed with helping you achieve all those horse dreams you always thought were impossible. Join me each week to develop a show-ready mindset and gain the competitive edge you need to compete with confidence.
Welcome back, everyone. I am so thrilled to welcome Alexis Mann here today. She is a non-pro reiner coming to us from Michigan, and she is currently taking a semester off, and she's going to be a student at the University of Michigan in the fall. And Alexis is a really inspiring story. She was born without her right hand due to amniotic band syndrome, and that absolutely has not stopped her or slowed her down in the least. She shows NRHA with her mare, Helen, who is a super cutie, and she's at Gunners Special Nite Mare, and they've had a ton of success together. Throughout her life, Alexis has struggled with confidence and just finding a way to fit in. I am so excited to have her on because that's what all of this Resilient Reiner stuff is about, is being resilient, finding your own inner confidence. And Alexis really works hard to just get 1% better each day, which I will shout from the rooftops. And so she's just such an inspiration to others around her. And she shares so much about inspiring others just to encourage them that they can really do anything that they set their minds to. And so I am just so thrilled to have her here and to inspire all of you listeners today. So welcome, Alexis.
Thank you so much for having me on. I was so excited, and just thank you again for the opportunity.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about Helen.
So Helen is 9 this year, which is hard to believe. I got her when she was 5 from Elizabeth Harton, who is located in Missouri. Helen's kind of background is she was bred and raised by the McCutcheon in their training program, and she got hurt before the NRHA for charity, and so she just kind of had a baby, bounced around a little bit, and then I ended up getting her, and she's just been kind of like that horse that really took my career from zero to hero kind of thing. And she's just been wonderful. We've grown a lot together because she was pretty great when I got her. So just kind of growing together in that sense.
Yeah. And so how did you get into reining?
So when I was growing up, I had a horse named Squirt. He was a horse, but really probably should have been called a pony. He was pretty small. And then a local trainer had some reiners, and so I took some lessons and I immediately loved it. And then got a few reiners here and there and worked myself up to where I am and have a lot of goals in the future that I'd love to accomplish. So
It's really cool. So would be kind of a fun question for you. How do you find that it's different showing and competing as a youth versus now the last couple years you're showing as as a non-youth
yeah,
here? You've graduated.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
So
know
that transition.
I'm getting old. I think just how my career happened to unfold is my youth years weren't the greatest in my show career just because I just the horse caliber and I wasn't as great as a rider. But then as I started getting older and I got Helen when I was around a senior in high school. And so senior, junior kind of year of high school. So just that the stage of my life where I did become more successful than I have in the past. I was kind of in that non-pro stage, and it is different. And I think it's even different showing youth than when I was in youth. I think it's more competitive now. The horses are better, the riders are better. And I think it's one of those things that evolves every day.
Yeah. Because I think it's one of those things that I think people can really underestimate the difference that any sort of transition can have on your confidence and what it's like to compete like that because, you may or may not think, oh, youth to non pro, but it's a big difference. It's kind of like how high school athletes transitioning to college, it can be a big
Mhm.
change. And you have to still find and develop your confidence to make that transition because it doesn't just happen. And so I think that that's really inspiring to both youth riders because it can really kind of throw you for a loop to go from showing
Yeah.
as a youth to showing as a rookie or a non-pro. And then even for adults, if you take time off for college or a job or kids and then you come back. And so just that transition can really throw people. So tell us, is there anything that was helpful for you in doing that or? Yeah.
I had some really great trainers. I think around that point of my career, when I was my later years of youth, I had the opportunity to ride with Sean Flaherty, and he really grew my confidence a ton. I was able to show one of his horses. And that was really the turning point in my career, was to be able to do that, learn from Sean. And he's successful for a reason. He's confident in his abilities. And so learning from that, even from a non-pro kind of aspect of it, and then the next year, my first kind of year out of the youth, I was a student at the University of Findlay. So I was riding horses all day, every day, getting time in the saddle. And that was a huge helping with my confidence in reining. And then I went on to the University of Tennessee at Martin and I was on their Division I equestrian team and learning tips and tricks on that. That helped a lot in my show career with Helen the last few years. And I honestly think kind of like anything, the more you're either stressed or worried about, learn about it, become a student of it, learn as much as you can. And that way, the more knowledge you have, the less anxiety or stress you're going to have about it.
Mhm. I hear you saying that it was really helpful to you to face all these sorts of fears head on because the boogeyman in your head is a lot worse than the boogeyman in reality.
Yes, 100%.
That's really cool. Well, so tell me some more about that and just kind of the things you did that help build your confidence. Cause I hear you talking about time in the saddle and building competency because there's absolutely that, competency influencing your confidence. And also, it sounds like you had some mentors helping, coach you through along mentally. So tell me more about all that.
I think what I found personally, and again, this is like a lifelong kind of knowledge thing. Like I don't have it figured out all the way, and I probably never will. It's just kind of those things where you evolve all the time. But for me personally, is it kind of struck a chord with me is my problems inside the arena were kind of reflections of my problems outside of the arena. So if I wasn't confident about myself as a person or how I looked, that's going to show up in the arena, even though you're not thinking about it. Just subconsciously, your brain's thinking of, oh, I'm not good enough in this aspect. So when tensions rise, nervous rises, that kind of thing, it just kind of magnifies it, but in a different way that you might not even realize that that is the trigger for it.
Yeah, that's really insightful because I think that it's so human to want to compartmentalize everything in our life instead of thinking
Mhm.
like, you know, like it's winter right now. And so it's hard to think about like, gosh, my car slipped on this patch of ice when I'm driving to the barn. And then you go to get on and ride and you're kind of all, and you're like, no, no, that's got to be
Mhm.
totally separate. So even in just those tiniest ways that it's absolutely so interconnected, nothing happens in a vacuum.
No, and I think a lot I know I personally used to do this. I used to separate horses from my personal life. Like, oh, to escape my personal life, I'm gonna go spend time at the barn or ride or stuff like that. But as the older I get, the more I'm finding out is the more I help myself in my personal life, whether that's academics, fitness, mental, it portrays in the arena, it shows in the show results and stuff like that. And that's what I found personally is the more I kind of take care of myself in the physical outside of the horse world, the more I see the results in the horse world. Yes, horses are very therapeutic, and I definitely agree. Like escaping to the barn is wonderful, but I found personally that it goes both ways to show up both ways.
It's really interesting because one thing I think that also really common is that as first people, we love our horses and we want to spoil
Mhm.
them and, take really good care of them and give them all the carrots and all the treats and all the fancy therapies. And I hear you saying too that one of the ways that's helped you to show up better for your horse is also to use a very non-descriptive word, some self-care, right? Because I hear you talking about you're finding that balance of self-care, and it has to be a little bit more balanced. It's not only the horses and nothing for Alexis.
And I found that out personally through failure. I would have a bad rider. My horse was fine. My horse was great, listened to exactly what told them, but it wasn't what I was supposed to. And so just realizing that not only are our horses athletes, but we're athletes. You look at Andrea, Sean, in any discipline, the higher up, they're athletes just as much. And I think in order for non-pros to be as successful is you have to think of yourself as an athlete. You're not like an Olympic athlete per se, like the big names are, but you're still an athlete in your sport. And I think taking care of that mindset, not only is my horse an athlete, but I have to show up for my team as well. We're expecting our horses to do so much for us, and they do so much for us. But if you can't show up for them, then it's kind of one-sided. And I know when I was younger, I used to miss that concept 100%. I would be like, why isn't my horse doing this or this or this? But the more I showed up for my horse as well, mentally, physically, making sure I got enough sleep, I can rely on them just as much as they rely on me.
Yeah, I've noticed that the more people I talk to, I really love this for all the equestrian sports is that it doesn't matter non-pro or pro. There's a big mindset shift that happens where people say like I really started, doing better and feeling better when I treated myself as an athlete. And I think
Mhm.
particularly for non-pros, this is a really big deal. And so I love that you're
Mhm.
bringing it up because I think that it can be real or it can be just real in your head, which makes it
Mhm.
real. And so I never look down on anyone because you're kind of like, well, if it's in your brain, it's real enough for you. And I
Yes.
feel a little embarrassed to be like, oh, well, I'm a non-pro. I'm not Sean Flaherty. I'm not Andrea
Mhm.
Papani. I'm not an Olympic athlete. Isn't it presumptuous of me to think of myself as an athlete? Like, am I being too uppity or this is my hobby? Like, I shouldn't be
Mhm.
taking it seriously. How do I balance having fun with my hobby with being a serious athlete? And so there's a lot of like stuff that you're sorting out mentally that when you start, you're like, no, I am an athlete. My horse is an athlete and I'm half that equation. that it really
Mhm.
like a big shift that, changes a lot.
I think honestly, what will help a lot of people is what are your goals? Are your goals to make the non-pro maturity finals, derby finals, or is your goal just to have fun on the weekend? And I think that goal really determines on how serious of an athlete you are. I mean, I heard a podcast the other day talking about marathon runners. You have people that finish it in 13 minutes, and you have your people that are so happy they just finished it. Wherever you fall on that spectrum is don't want to be I just don't want riders to be, well, I just want to be a weekend kind of warrior. I don't want to I don't want to I go there for fun. And so I don't want to put in all the work that a non-pro futurity finalist would kind of do. So I think that where your goals are will really, really help you not only feel more happy in the sport and then kind of adjust what you're going to do to get there.
Yeah, I love that because I hear you saying that knowing what your goals are and knowing what your why is, it really helps. It's taking the pressure off because it's saying you're
Mhm.
either that this is a time in your life when you can devote a little bit less time and energy. And so that's okay. Then you can be all in and take all the guilt, take all the pressure off. Or
Mhm.
if it's a time when you're like, no, this is really a time when I want to put a lot of time and energy in, then own that and don't be ashamed of that either, because that really it just clarifies so many of your decisions.
And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck in life really, is especially with social media, it's probably made it 10 times worse as we like to compare of like, okay, I have a 69 horse, but man, why am I not getting 72? What am I doing wrong? And then we get really frustrated or vice versa of I have a 72 horse, but my friend has a 74 and winning everything. Like, what am I doing wrong? And so I think just doing a lot of like, this is my goals, this is the horse that I have, and setting realistic goals. And nothing wrong with dreaming big. Go for it, girl. But just making sure that you can set even little goals at the start to make sure that you're still enjoying this because at the end of the day, we do this to enjoy and we love our horses and we're not in the positions like horse trainers where this is our livelihood. So just take advantage of that and enjoy it.
Yeah, and I think another way even to put that, because again, we're like getting right into the meat and potatoes right at the beginning here. I think we just go for it. It's like, is that there's these kind of uncomfortable things that, especially if you haven't said them out loud before, it's kind of you're like, I might stumble over my words here. I'm trying to express this uncomfortable idea because one things I'm hearing you saying when it comes to gold is that because again, we find ourselves at different points in our life. We have different
Mhm.
amounts of time, different resources, all sorts of things. And so when it comes to setting goals, it can feel like a letdown to ourself or a letdown or an embarrassment to say like, oh, well, my goal is not to win the fraternity this year. My goal is like, I want to go to my 4 local shows this year. That's my big,
Mhm.
and that's how I like to phrase it too is, you're already starting to shift from like, oh, well, don't be afraid of not making big goals or setting realistic goals. But I like to phrase it a lot more of how you're getting into just set like small goals, like that you might have a
Mhm.
big goal. So even there, like your local show circuit, but it's finding those small moments of progress because that is, you know, how you get to your big goals is through those little
Mhm.
goals, right? Where you're like, I'm going to go and I'm going to get 0 penalties in this run, or I'm going to
Yes.
go, and so just really dialing in on those small goals because then the other thing that allows you to is that really allows you to feel good about yourself.
Mhm.
Right? Because instead of focusing on you've got a 72 horse and your friend has a 74 horse, you're like, no, we had all of our lead changes were dead on center. Like
Mhm.
we had no penalties. This is amazing. And you just start dialing in on your goals and your
Mhm.
horse. And then it brings so much joy when you really
Yes.
are focused on you instead of how you're not as good as somebody else.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that I really liked reining when I first got into it, just because it is a kind of an individual sport, meaning like your only ride that you should base it on is your last one, not your friends, not your teammates.
Yeah.
Your teammate is your horse. And so you can really, there's a lot of chances for self development in that.
There really are. Yeah. It's really like a cool, it's just a cool balance, and I
Mhm.
think a lot of these different horse disciplines are the same, but like with reining, and I'm sure you see it all the time where you're like, well, I know that horse is a 74 horse and this horse is not, but depending on how you ride and how focused you are, like it's
Mhm.
not predetermined at all, you know?
No,
So it
no.
it kind of keeps pulling you back. You're like, who knows? You never know
Yeah,
what's going to
for
happen.
sure. For sure. 100%.
Well, that's awesome. So tell me how riding a bunch of different horses influenced your development of confidence. It sounds like that was a part of it. So what did that do for you?
So in my youth career, and this is a big change between my youth career and then now I'm starting going back to that now that I'm completely changing my life. But I would have lessons about once or twice a week, and that was all I'd ride because my horse was there. I'd go, and I didn't really have trainers close, so it was a really far drive. And then once I started riding more, I was riding 3 to 4 a day. And so that adds up. That's like within a week, I'm having almost a month worth of lessons and kind of just like putting your reps in. The more time you're going to go to the gym, the faster you're going to get results. The more time, it's kind of not the amount of time, but how many reps you put in. And so I was putting in a lot more reps. So I was seeing a lot of more positive or negative feedback very quicker. So instead of making the same mistake all month because I'd only ride 4 times, I was making those 4 times in a day or 2 days. And I think putting more reps in that really helped me of like, okay, this is what I do really well and what are my weaknesses are. And so when I'd go show, I'd be like, okay, I really know that I need to make sure my lead changes are great, or okay, I feel confident in how I turn. And so just kind of putting those reps in that really made me more confident in where my weaknesses are and where my strengths were.
Well, and it sounds like you're also pretty self-aware. And so you're learning those
Mhm.
lessons because, you're noting things like, oh, I rode these three horses and, oh, they all made that same mistake. Wait, that was me,
Yeah.
And so it's,
Yeah.
yeah. So just bringing that awareness, because I think that's definitely a practice that people can take away, even with one horse, of
Mhm.
just taking a minute after your ride and noting like what went well, where can you improve? And then you can learn those lessons a lot faster.
And I would personally recommend for anybody that has the time or wants to dedicate that is honestly after every lesson or every ride, kind of maybe create a journal of like, okay, this is what I did really well. This is what I did not do well. This is my goal for, and it doesn't even have to be a page long. It could be a sentence of that way you're just kind of internalizing it because there are a whole bunch of studies on it, but the more you write stuff down, the easier you are to remember it. So when you get back in that saddle, you're like, boom, okay, I sucked at lead changes. I need to really make sure I set my horse up properly because that's one of my weaknesses is setting my horse up properly for those lead changes. Where another area of the arena I might be good at. And so the more you kind of can self reflect and write it down, the more you remember it and even have a discussion with your trainer of like, hey, I keep making these same mistakes. Can you help me? Because sometimes even those conversations aren't had when they should be had.
Cool. Well, how did you manage the mental aspect of riding all these different horses and switching from one to another because
Mhm.
they are not the same?
No, for sure. And when I went to Finley, they knew I had such a rating background that they gave me every all around horse I ever had there. And so that was a complete transition, but I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. I truly think, and we see a lot of these riders that come from the AQHA circuit or another discipline, and their reiners move differently, but it's actually better. I don't think enough is talked about how different disciplines can help each other out in a way of how a cutting horse, how they're more relaxed, may come over to the reiners, make them more relaxed, run those circles a little prettier or how the rainers stop. It can contribute to a lot of things. And I think that there's nothing wrong with riding a few AQHA horses, hunter horses, and seeing, okay, I can bring this to my reiners, or maybe not this to my reiners, but this is what my reiners can bring to this horse. And so that was really cool to kind of play around with that a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. I'll admit one of the things that like cuz for a long time lead changes just felt like
Mhm.
I don't know, elusive to me. And so I love to watch the jumpers, like Hunter Jumper, and I would just tell myself, I was like, those people, those horses just have their nose out and they're just like swapping leads. And I was like, if they can do that, I was like, I can do that. So just figuring out like how to find an inspiration and how to find something that you're like, yeah, I could take something from that. Like,
Yeah, for sure. 100%.
So you're saying like one of the things that really helped you in the saddle was sorting out all of your feelings and confidence and all of the out of the saddle stuff. So what were
Mhm.
some of the habits or the things that you did that helped you with that?
Again, this is always like a learning process. Like I'm super excited. I'm spending a lot of time right now working on my mental health and strengthening that. So I'm excited to see how that can portray into this show season. But just I started kind of learning about it. I didn't really know a lot about. I knew like okay, mental health, go to therapy. Like that's was basically the little knowledge I had of it. So I became a student of it, different techniques, what it at different athletes, entrepreneurs use. Um, that kind of you can always learn from somebody. So I tried to learn everything I could about it. I became a student of it. And then I tried to think of ways I could put that to horses. So as I'm riding around, I'm taking deep breaths, like in the warm up, taking deep breaths, thinking of kind of affirmations. And you're probably like, well, that's silly. There's like a million things going on. And there is. And you got to be listening to your trainer. But even if you're just walking your horse after loping, just take a minute, deep breaths, visualize your run going really, really well. And also, I rode with Robin Schuler this year and I actually loved it. And one thing that his assistant Cole would always tell me was, okay, you put in the reps, trust it, go have fun. Trust that all the rides you're doing. Because I know I used to do this all the time of I get to show day and I would forget I spent hours preparing for this. I'd be like, oh man, like I'm not prepared. Where kind of step back and go, okay, I spent coming into whenever you're showing first this year, I spent months working on this. I gotta trust it of what me and my horse are. Trust that process, trust your reps. Even if it doesn't go perfectly, have confidence, trust that you put the work in and that you want to go have fun. And I found that really helped me this year in a lot of ways. Just kind of having that mindset right before I go in. It kind of quieted down a lot of like, oh my God, what does this happen? What does this happen? What does this happen? And that really helped me a lot.
Yeah, I hear you sharing that, and I love to do all these same things, but
Mhm.
deep breathing. Because this cool thing about breathing is that it really does change your brain and your biology. Like it's
Yes.
incredible. And so breathing, visualizing, affirmations that they really help. And then trusting the training, trusting
Mhm.
how you're putting it, trusting your reps. And so you're like, yes, I've done what I need to do.
Mhm. And it's how I kind of put in when I applied to Michigan of, okay, I did absolutely everything that I could. Everything is going to be up to chance whether the horse behaves or whatever, but just know going in, okay, I did absolutely everything the best I could do. So whatever happens in there is a reflection of, okay, this is what I need to do better, or hey, it really worked out. And breathing is really interesting, especially since horses can feel our movements and feeling so quickly that they can feel when your heart is going like a million miles an hour. So if you can kind of slow that down, that's just one less thing that they're like anxious about or nervous about. You just kind of going back to you're a team as well. So doing your part for the team.
So tell me a little bit about how have you, because there is this back and forth with our horses. And
Mhm.
I know a lot of times riders can want to and do rely on their horse, right? It's why you're like, well,
Mhm.
this is why I bought my fancy pants horsey here, right?
Yes.
It's not gonna cover my mistakes, take care of me. That's why I have that horse. That's why I have them in
Yes.
that I'm supposed to be able to allow to mess up all I want. And so how do you kind of balance like, there's kind of a growth from my horse is taking care of me, my horse is giving me confidence to I'm an athlete, we're a team, I'm providing
Mhm.
confidence to my horse. Like, what is your kind of experience growing through that give and take there?
Oh gosh, I think it's definitely I feel like a more older kind of thought process. Like when you're a youth, it's about fun and just going through it. But as you get older, it really changed. And I think for me, the biggest change for that was the horse I showed when I rode with Sean was one of those horses where he took care of me. Like he got me through the pattern, helped my mistakes. Like he was there. Or Helen, she was a little greener, so if I messed up, she would mess up with me. Not to be bad, but I asked for a lead change and she did it even though it wasn't in the right spot per se. And so I think that was the biggest aspect of growing with Helen was I came from Frecklefoot who would take care of me to Helen of didn't really know any better. Now she's obviously grown so much and kind of has become that horse. But starting out, it was kind of like learning that, okay, this horse is a little greener. I need to show up for this horse as well. And I think a lot of people experience that going from their youth horse to their first aged event horse. I think that's a huge transition a lot of people make.
Did you find that difficult mentally, or did it feel like a natural progression as you were going through it?
Oh, it was hard. I'm not going to sugarcoat that at all. It was hard. And I was very fortunate and I had success with Helen very early. Like the first show I ever had her, we went and did really well. Um, so at first it was kind of like an expectation of like, okay, we're going to do well. We did fine. And then once we started having little slip ups here and there of, okay, she's anticipating you now, just we've all been there. And so just learning even today, I'm still learning how to do it, still learning how can I show up for her because she's showing up for me. And we invest so much money in them, so much time, which rightfully so, but we need to invest ourselves also if we really want to make this a full team.
Well, so as you're doing this and you're going from, a youth to riding with Sean Florida, riding at
Mhm.
Finley in Tennessee, like
Mhm.
you would have been exposed to quite a few different, mentors and role models. Like, how have these different people inspired you in through reining and kind of shaped your mental approach to the sport?
Oh gosh. Sean was really my first kind of very serious barn, and I'm very thankful for that experience of just the professionalism. And there's still a lot of things, even just horse care, that I still use today. And Finley horse care is just, you can learn from so many different people. And even if it's just one thing that they do, like how they brush their horse, because I just got finished reading Atomic Habits. And I saw so many ways that you can apply this to horses. It was just essentially how little habits can change your life or your career. They talked about how a cycling team changed like the color of the bikes or little minute details like that. And so if you can change little minute details that you learn from a trainer, a friend, a coworker, or a competitor, that those can add up over time. And I think that was the biggest thing of just seeing it's kind of like the saying, take what you want, leave what you don't. And you can apply that in so many ways, but that's kind of what I thought of. I can apply this. I don't really like that they do this, but I love what they do that.
Yeah, and the book she's talking about is Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's a classic
Mhm.
of just start little atomic-sized habits. So,
Mhm.
yeah, that was what got me to be like, "Okay, I don't have to brush all my teeth. I just have to brush 1 tooth." Okay? Like
Yeah,
that's the habit,
1%.
right? 1 tooth, and then I might keep going, but, like, only have to
Mhm.
brush 1 tooth. Yeah. The thing that's really cool about growing up like this is that we can spend so long in a single barn with a single trainer that
Mhm.
we can kind of forget that there's other ways of doing things, right? And you're,
Yes.
well, this must be the only way the entire world does this, right?
Yeah.
So, like, I even just little things, like, I'm thinking of my brain right now is like polo wraps. Like, I grew up
Mhm.
and you would always wrap the polo wrap, like, under the fetlock too. And
Mhm.
now, like, I see so many people in Western disciplines who don't do that. And I think it's,
No.
all the, weird, like, there's plenty of
Mhm.
reasons they don't. And so just even little things like that, where it's really cool that you've been able to be exposed to so many different ways of doing things to be able to bring together, just take what works and leave the rest. And that's a really healthy way to grow and improve.
Yes. And you don't even have to change trainers for that. Even spending like a weekend at a show, you can learn so much if you pay attention, good and bad. You can see people that you're like, oh my gosh, I don't like how they're doing that. And I never thought about doing it that way, whether that's seeing people ride at midnight or just how they care the horse right before they go in. There's so many opportunities to learn and grow just even watching. Like you're still in the same barn, but you're watching what a barn down the way goes or how stuff like that. And I've seen that of how like different barns will have a certain ways, even just how they set up their aisle. And then it will like the rest of the aisles will look the same over the next 3 years. And so you just gotta find what's gonna work for you, but you can always learn. Always learn.
I love that. I always say that curiosity is a superpower. And
Mhm.
demonstrating that in such a healthy way that just being curious, like really not coming at it from a perspective of this is wrong, that's different, like you,
Mhm.
oh, what are they doing? And the perspective of curiosity about how different folks do things and the perspective of, yes, I can learn something from everybody, even if I learned that I don't prefer to do it that way. That's really like, it takes you so far to have that just open curiosity and learning.
Mhm. For sure, 100%. And I mean, horse trainers do it all the time. I feel like all of our trainers have mid-horse called another person like, "Oh my gosh, it's not working. Like, what should I do?" So even
Yeah.
professionals do it. So there's no reason non-pros can't.
You know? Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I love that example of like, you're like, you literally don't even have to go work with another trainer. You can just show up on the
Mm-mm.
pro and pop squat and just,
Yep.
you can learn for free. That's so cool. Well, so as you're doing all this, can you think of a memorable moment through your reining journey where your mental performance or your mindset really played a pivotal role in your success or overcoming a hurdle?
Oh gosh, I feel like there's like every show I've ever had.
Tell several. That
Um, I remember, well, I'll start with one. It was the year of 2020, so COVID, and the Congress got canceled. So there was the show in Memphis, and I was still riding with Sean, and I had freckle foot. And I think I showed like 3 times. I did so bad. Like, I was just awful. In that final run, like, I was fed up with it. Just because I wasn't performing my best, and at the time, I didn't have a lot of the same tools I have now, so I was very lost, frustrated, and I just finally was like, "You know what? We're gonna do well. I don't really care if we both, like, don't survive, like, we're gonna do it well." Because it was just little stupid things that would happen that was just frustrating, and I just kind of mentally, like, was, like, done, and we ended up winning that day. We won the class, and I think that was very huge of I was having very bad run, and I was able to kind of push through it and just have a good run and ended up winning the class. And that was, I remember, very huge for me of it would have been very easy to take that negative of the previous classes and bring it in. And that's what I was doing before. So to finally just kind of like close it, shut it down, and just go perform well that day, I think that was a huge turning point that I still look back on even today of like, okay, I had a few bad runs with Helen. That does not guarantee the next one's going to be like that. I think that was huge for me, just even in life of like, your breakthrough will happen. Just you got to keep pushing.
That is so key. That really is. It feels like a secret to life is that just because
Mhm.
you had a bad run, it doesn't mean you're a bad rider. It doesn't mean you have
Yeah.
a failed team. It doesn't mean that your next run is going to be trash. It just
Yeah.
being able to leave it in the past.
Because that was my mindset a lot of the times was like, oh, like, okay, I had a bad show. The next show's going to be bad. And chances are it would be bad because that was my mindset. And so even just those bad runs can serve as such good reflections, but they don't have to determine your future.
So what do you do if you have a bad run now? You know, she might slip
Mhm.
on the ground, you've got a cold, you kind of get overcome by something. What do you do now if you have a bad run?
So normally how me and my trainer do it, Robin and Cole, we go watch the video, say what we did well, what we didn't do well. And a lot of times, and I never used to do this before, but I'd go back and look at it as well. Again, afterwards, kind of slowed the time down of like, okay, this is what I was thinking. And thankfully, Robin and Cole this year were very informative as well. So they'd explain something of like, yeah, okay, I never thought about that, but that's what I was doing. And so having people like that in your corner that can watch those runs with you, I think are huge and beneficial. And even if it's just your friend of like, hey, can you watch this with me? Like, I can't figure out like what I did wrong. They might see something that you're not thinking of because you're in the moment. And I think that's huge. Then just kind of when you're warming up that next day or the next show, think about, okay, make it that your one goal. Like for me at the Derby, I remember I missed a lead change. I didn't set her up properly. And so the last day I was there, I was like, okay, my one goal is to get that lead change. It doesn't matter anything else. If I get that one lead change, I'm going to be so happy. And I made that a focus of my run and I got that lead change and we ended up having a really good run. I think that's helped me a lot of like, okay, if I'm going through a rough patch, okay, I'm constantly missing leads. I'm constantly like trotting out of my rollback. Make that your singular goal for that next run, even if you have to go in a lower level class, so you're not paying the entry fees. But just make that your goal of, okay, I'm gonna make sure I get my rollback, get my leg, and not trot out of there. And I think that's helped me a lot.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I heard you saying that you like to review your runs and you're both reviewing the runs from a technical standpoint of I want
Mhm.
to understand my score. And so like, oh, why did I get this score? I don't quite connect it. But the other thing you said that was really cool is that you're also connecting your technical maneuver to your mindset at that moment. And so if something
Mhm.
is going particularly well or blow it, you can be like, "Oh, yeah." Because I'm sure, like, with Rainers, you might be like, "Oh, I overspun to the right because I was busy thinking about my spin to the
Mhm.
left," and
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I can catch that." So you're connecting
Mhm.
your mind and your physical performance, and then you're also giving yourself, like we talked about earlier, like, a specific tiny goal for each run. So you're putting
Mhm.
the success on your terms instead of I mean, we all wanna win, we all wanna be cashing checks,
Yeah.
you know? But
Yeah.
instead of being like, "Well, it's gonna be a failure, and I need to beat myself up if we don't win everything," and
Mhm.
it's kind of like, "Okay, my number one goal is clean lead change." And it
Mhm.
really makes you so much more empowered and focused, and
Mhm.
you're like, "Yes, I have a positive forward focus for this run," and that's a totally different mind spot than like,
Mhm.
"I'm gonna blow it up again. I can't mess it up."
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're taking that same scenario and shifting it into just such a healthier perspective on how to
Mhm.
handle it.
Mhm. And that's what's really worked out for me that may not work for some people, or you can find it of like, "Oh, I get what she's saying, but I can do it this way. Go for it." Like, this is not go for it. So,
Well, what if you have an amazing run? So what do you do now if you have a really great run?
thankfully, I've had, a few. So, if I have a really great one, oh gosh, this is a great question.
Do you
'Cause
celebrate? Do you acknowledge? Like
I feel like a lot of people, and I know myself, we take the really good run, but then we don't really reflect on it, which I think could be as damaging as not reflecting on the bad run. Because if you
I
don't know what
agree.
went well, if you don't know what went well, how can you do it in the future? So if you can
Yeah.
be like, oh, I really did that well, or okay, that finally worked. Whether that's a lead change or stops or whatever. And you can learn just as much from a good run. And I know I used to be of like, oh, okay, I got my 70 plus run. I'm good. And not like back at it as much as you should have, because you can learn that much more from it as well. I think that was a big learning point for me. And embracing those runs as much as as the bad runs. And even in life, I feel like we always tend to like look at the negatives 100 times more than the positives. And so just kind of making that shift as well.
Yeah, it's important because if you don't, you kinda treat a good run like a fluke when you do that. You're like,
Yeah.
"Oh my
Yeah.
god," there's nothing to learn there instead of like, "How did I prepare? How much sleep did I get the night?" Because I know I always have better runs when I have better sleep.
Yes, me
It's
too.
all kind of just
Yeah.
backing up to all of these things of like, what can I learn from it? What can I replicate in the future to have more good
Mhm. Yeah, exactly.
and even just acknowledging it, because I think sometimes we can feel it feels not humble to embrace,
Yeah.
"Oh, I had a really great run. We did incredible. My horse was the best." And so you feel, like, uncomfortable to revel in that, to allow yourself to feel really good about it and also to learn from it.
No, 100%, and I think that's helped me a lot.
Yeah. Well, how about so we're all human. And so I think many of our listeners are going to have their own mental obstacles, physical obstacles. They're going to have something that
Mhm.
is their big challenge. So, what sort of advice would you give them in terms of building mental resilience and just pushing through adversity?
Oh gosh, this is a great question too, and it's one of those that it's kind of reminds me of like a fingerprint. Like everyone has their own individual story of their own
Uh,
individual fingerprint. Gosh, so it's hard to give like a street corner like advertisement.
oh,
Um,
just wander then, It's
um, I think for me is it took a lot. I struggled a lot in my life, and even last semester, that was probably, I mean, that was only a couple months ago, but that was the hardest point I've ever been through in my life. It was quite awful. And my mental health was pretty much zero. So I'm working very hard now to become a student of it and build back up. And I have a lot, and I'm making really good decisions for me to get out of that kind of situation. I think that no matter what adversity, I guess my biggest thing is just because you're going something that the news or the media or social media may think of like not as big, like it's still important. And growing up, I always try to say, like, yeah, I have one hand, and yes, that's really important, but that doesn't make me greater or less than someone. Like, just because someone goes through depression, like that's huge for them. That is their kind of one hand or cancer or something like that. And I feel like society ranks kind of adversities in a way of like, if you have this, no one can be worse off than you. Or if you have depression, like everyone's so much happier than you. So just kind of owning your differences in a good way of like, yeah, I struggle with this, but it's important to me. I'm trying to think of a good way to word this, because just because you're going through something doesn't, you're not struggling as much as the next person, or you're not struggling less than. Because I feel like people get wrapped up with, oh, I have this, but I don't have cancer. I have this, but come from a good family. And I think it's very important to kind of own your truth in a way that will help you get over it or push through it. Because I think people get in a rut of, okay, I have depression, but it's not, I could be homeless. And so they never get past their depression because they put it down. They make themselves feel lesser because they're dealing with it when their life is good otherwise. And I think that really helped me a lot of, I used to say, well, I have one hand, but it could be so much worse. Where instead of like, yeah, I have one hand, like it's hard some days. And I think kind of focusing on myself and focusing on my battles that I do face, or people face battles every day. So I think owning your truth and owning what you go through, it can help the next person a lot. I really think it can.
Yeah. The phrase that's coming to mind that I don't know if people still say this, but princess problems.
Mhm.
And so where it just is very like devaluing of whatever you're going through, kind of exactly what
Mhm.
you were saying. Like, well, maybe I'm depressed, but like we have a nice house, or maybe like,
Yeah.
but I don't have cancer. And it
Mhm.
really circumvents like any sort of feeling and processing. Like there's no way for you to honor and feel those emotions. And if you don't ever
Mhm.
allow yourself to feel what you're going through, that can be as little as like, I'm really disappointed that we had a bad run to I broke my leg or I'm feeling extremely depressed. Like if you don't allow yourself to honor those feelings and just feel them, then they bottle up and can just explode
Mhm.
out instead of allowing yourself to feel them and then whatever comes next. And
Yeah, for sure. At least that's how I always thought of it, of how I used to think about it and now how I think about it. And honestly, for me, growing up, I was very scared of therapy. It was like a very negative. I think I read way too many books that were like anti-therapy or whatever the fiction were. And so I was very scared of it. And I was very scared of, oh, for a variety of reasons. But I've gone through some really hard times, and so I kind of have to go now, and it's honestly helped me a ton of just kind of thinking about those things. Sometimes therapy works for a lot of people, but sometimes it doesn't. And I think my biggest thing is don't be afraid to try it. You can always, whether that's therapy, talking to someone, talking to your friend, your mom, your trainer, even if you're scared about something in the pen, talk to them. If it doesn't go well, don't do it again. Just move on to something else. But I think my biggest advice is try it. You can always not go again or not do that thing. But if it's going to help you, why not try it?
oh, well, that's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing because I think that things are really changing where people are starting to get a lot more comfortable reaching out
Hmm.
for help. And maybe
Yeah.
one therapist works. Maybe you try like 5 therapists or
Yeah.
try something else, but just being willing to, you know, like I just think you have such a beautiful perspective through everything you've talked about of being curious and learning, and whether
Mhm.
that's learning more about your horse, learning more about your mental health, learning from other riders. Like
you just are approaching everything was just such, I think, a beautiful empathy and a beautiful like curiosity and care in a way that is very accepting, and it makes me want to go to a show with you. Just, I think that no, I mean, I'm really complimenting you because I used to be so much more judgmental when I was
Mhm.
younger, and I've gotten like a lot so much better. But that was the real growth point for me personally, was kind of
Mhm.
coming with that like empathy and understanding. I mean, at this point, I could see just about anything, and I'm like, well, they're probably doing the best they can. Like
Mhm.
I got nothing to say, you know? It's like,
No, for sure.
and anyway, it's really beautiful. So
Thank you, and
I'm glad you're here in the horse community.
thank you. Again, it's been and it continue will be a lifelong process, and I think I've just had some situations where I've had to go through that and had to go through that in the personal and horse world, and I think that's probably fast forwarded my track a little bit. But, if I can help anybody, that would make it all worth it, so
Yeah, because that's the other thing that I really agree with that you brought up is that like horses, it's so normal to think of horses as our escape, or horses is so
Mhm.
separate from our private lives. And you're like, well, they're very entangled. It's all connected because you're still you. So,
Yeah, exactly. And I found that's where I grew a lot as a rider of just realizing that, okay, I wasn't confident. If I'm not confident going to the store, how am I going to be confident when I'm riding? And trainers always say, and people always say horses lose 20% of what you kind of teach them in the show pen. Well, that kind of goes the same for you. So if you're going through some mental issues outside or you're kind of struggling with whatever, that's just only gonna be magnified with nerves and stuff like that. You may not be thinking about it, but the brain has a funny way of thinking the same.
yeah. Well, so I guess my last question here that I'm thinking of would be, you've talked about things that you do before you do a run, and you've talked about therapy as well. Do you have any sort of daily habits or things that you do that help you with your confidence and facing this stuff?
Oh gosh, yeah, so I've created, like, a whole morning routine that I do now,
Yeah.
just especially after reading Atomic Habits and just becoming a student of it, of mental health, that I can really learn from it and use it. Because at first, when I was younger, of like, "Okay, I have no idea what I'm doing," and I get frustrated and I quit. And so once I become a student of it, I can learn and apply these techniques. So I have a certain time I get out of bed every day, and then I take Coda out. I do that. I journal. I found that all people used to say journal, journal, and I used to be like brush it off like no, like I'm not a diary person. But and I found it's a really good way to kind of release any negative thoughts I have going into the day or anything I'm thinking of. Just kind of dump it out and move on with my day. And I found that to be really helpful. Drink a lot of water, exercise, eat healthy, meditate. That's huge. I never really used to even think about it, but um, Michigan's quarterback at the time, JJ McCarthy, talked a lot about it and how it's helped him. And so I became again a student of it and still learning through it. And I have this time though, people may be listening like, I don't have that time, like I have a job responsibility. I kind of have this time to learn, but you can still incorporate different things. So let's just say, um, it's called habit stacking, but if you brush your teeth and you want to meditate, well, meditate for a minute after you brush your teeth. So when you brush your teeth, you automatically think of meditating. Or you want to exercise, we'll put as soon as you get home from work, change into your exercise clothes. So just there are so many ways that you can do it, no matter what your life is, what your responsibilities are. And I've already seen where they're kind of building blocks. It may seem like you're getting nowhere, but it does work over time.
Well, I'm just so glad that you came on. Thank you so much. It's just so lovely to talk with you and just to hear you putting all these things into practice. And it makes me want to catch back up again with you in like 6 months. Because you keep doing it, you're gonna get even stronger because you're so
Mhm.
right that it is a lifelong practice. It's one of the things that I think
Yes.
catches a lot of like adult riders kind of by surprise, is that they think like that it's so fixed, right? That it's like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
confident as a non-pro, non-confident as an adult, or like, why do I feel different at different times in my life? And kind of
Mhm.
realizing that no, it's a constant practice. It's not a fixed trait. So doing the things that you were talking about, like journaling, meditation, taking
Mhm.
time every day to exercise, water, it adds up and it makes a big difference. And so I'm just so grateful for you for sharing just with everybody because
Thank you.
I think that's a lot of what the horse community needs is people hearing it's not just Olympic athletes. It's not just
No.
football players. It's also like, hey, do you know that this works for horse folks too? And
Yes.
like,
Yeah,
really? Tell me more. And you're like, yeah.
and I truly believe the more you take care of yourself outside the ring, the more you're gonna show up in the ring. I mean, you think of runners or you think of any other athletes, if they eat like crap or they don't take care of themselves, there's no way they're gonna be able to perform their sport. I feel like horses is thought of as just kind of separate in a lot of ways when it really is no different.
Yeah, I think it's really evolving just into more of a sport because it's had such a
Mhm.
historical, you know, background and the roots are as much more applied work. And so
Yes.
to grow out of those working roots into more of a sport, it's an evolution of being as athletes. So,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
well, is there anything else you want to share today?
Just thank you so much for having me on. Even if this helps one person, then it's awesome. And that no matter who you are, what you want to accomplish, you can do it. You just got to believe in yourself.
Oh, and then I'll put your info in the show notes for the podcast. But if people
Perfect.
want to find you on Instagram and see your amazing Helen too, I you share your Instagram handle.
It's sliding. I'll spell it out because
Okay.
a lot of people get tripped up on it, but it's at SLIDING _and _spinning. Um, and yeah, always feel free to DM. I'm always open to DMs. I love meeting new people. Know a lot of friends through Instagram, so I'm always open to more. And if you have any questions or need some mental health help or guidance, I'd always be happy to help.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Lexus. It's just been my pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
sharing with us today.
Thank you again for having me on. It's been an honor.
You're so welcome.